3 bleed procs on Millennia in less than 3 seconds. Patch update 1.07 has turned a innocent, overlooked, kinda alrightish Ash of War into the new ultimate bleed machine. So what am I talking about as I bring you today the ultimate bleed build, or at least the new ultimate bleed build. Ever since double seppuku was, well, let's be honest, rightly nerfed, the search has been on to find maximum bleed per time, otherwise known as BPT, and today's BPT is maximum. I'm gonna stop making up terms now and get to the juicy bits. Meet Blood Blade then. This, as I say, innocent little Ash of War, you do a little bit of damage to yourself and then fire out a very low range, low speed, high fall off projectile of blood that does an alrightish bit of damage and does an alrightish bit of bleed. That was kind of it. That was its whole function and kind of paled in comparison to a lot of bleed based Ashes of War. However, in 1.07, that has changed, and it's such a tiny little change that you could see makes sense, and no one would ever really think it would do that much, right? But no, it really does. So, Bloodblade now has increased power. That's fine, of course, and you can go into it faster after performing another action. That's useful, but nothing crazy. It's this added damage detection to the weapon part. That is what has broken this Ash of War. What does that actually mean? Well, obviously when you perform the action, you swing the weapon left and right to swing out the blood. Swing out the blood. I don't know why, but that's a really satisfying thing to say. You should try it sometime. And before, that didn't actually connect or do damage, which didn't make sense, because you're swinging your weapons. If something's in front of you, it should get hit by it, right? Well, now it does. But the thing is, now you're hitting with weapon while firing out the blood blade. That means you're hitting with weapon effects, with status, with weapon buffs, with anything special the weapon can do, and firing out the enhanced blood slash. Which means that you can not just fire out the blood blade and do a little bit of bleed build-up. You can not just fire out the blood blade and hit with an already existing bleed weapon and do a lot more bleed build-up. It means you can fire out the blood blade, hit with a bleed weapon that has been covered in blood flame, and cause a guaranteed bleed with every single swing of the sword. At least, if the opponent's resistances are allowing for it, but even in higher resistance, you will still do 80 to 90% of a bleed bar every back and forth. That is ludicrous, and on bosses, well, you can imagine how that goes. Every 1-2 swing, bleed, bleed. On anything that gets flinched by bleed, I don't know, like Millennia, it's just hilarious. They can't do anything, and then they die. But even on the chunkier bosses, I mean, it just does so much damage. Because you are getting that big chunk, 20% of their health, boom pop, constantly. It just is silly. If you can get even a few seconds of chaining this together, well, you've basically just won. And that's so much fun. Of course, the actual weapon damage itself is less than the double seppuku twin curved swords and that lunacy, but that's got a lot worse. In terms of pure bleed per time, as I was saying, BPT, this is premium. There is really no way to beat this, at least not that I'm aware of. You get such a compound effect of triple amounts of bleed applying, and well, it's really hard to stop. Even in PvP, if someone tries for even just a second to trade with this, well, yeah, they're just going to explode. So, one thing to note about this is you don't have to fire it off as rapidly as possible. You can delay the follow-up input and still keep the chain going to mix up your timings. As a warning though, this does cost stamina, of course, every time you fire out a blood blade, which means if you're not keeping an eye on your stamina, well, you can kind of do what I did here, which was get really excited that he's going to trade with the blood blade and die, and why did it stop? Oh, I ran out of stamina, and now I'm dead. Oh, yeah, that was really quite sad. So I of course did a little bit of experimenting, and you've basically got two choices. Either you use a arcane scaling bleed weapon, which means you can't blood flame it, and well, go that way. That will result in a little bit of more raw damage, but much less bleed than if you use a weapon with an affinity that lets you still buff it, and obviously apply blood flame on top of it. So we've gone for the Nagakiba, a very strong AR weapon. It's very long, it's a katana, that's got a very nice moveset, it's got natural bleed, it's got good scaling with your dex, which we need to leave it at so we can buff it, and of course it has that sweet vibe to it when blood flamed up. It really just is the best of, well, all worlds here. We get the damage, we get the range, we get the perfect base template to apply this build to. And what exactly is the build in general? Well, of course, we have the Nagakiba with the Blood Blade on Keen. We have a seal for our classic trio of buffs, the Blood Flame Blade, the Flame Grant Me Strength, which will buff the slight bit of fire damage you do get from Blood Flame Blade, so that's quite nice, as well as the physical, and then Golden, make my build 15% better, please and thank you. This is, of course, lovely, and it goes with the White Mask for an extra 10% damage when you get those bleeds, Shard of Alexander for 15% more on the Ash of War. We've got both of our continuous attacks make you go stronger, Talismans in Millicent's Prosthetic and Rotten Winged, because if you do get a good chain of back and forth, back and forth, back and forth, you can get up to an extra 40% damage with these two, and then an extra 20% from Lord of Bloods when you get that bleed proc in your Wondrous, more consecutive attacks, and a bit of poise so you can tank through attacks while you start your bleed chain. Because again, once the first bleed happens and you flinch the enemy, it's just over at that point. It really, really is. In PvP, I would maybe recommend swapping both the Prosthetic and the Rotten Wings for something a bit more defensive, like the Dragon Crest, maybe some Bull Goat for poise, as it's not as needed there, but have a little play around and see what works best for you. Other than that, then, the method is simple. You get yourself all buffed up, find a nice opening on whichever enemy you are fighting, and then start slashing back and forth. You'll get your first bleed within 1-2 most slashes, and from there you just keep going until whatever is facing you has been deleted into a bloody puddle in front of you. It's just incredibly satisfying, and it's so, well, impactful, just letting the swing count as a normal weapon hit here. It really does change the entire dynamic of this Ash of War and turn it into this ultimate bleed powerhouse that just feels so much fun to use while being just so powerful. And of course, you've just got a solid blood flamed up Nagakiba katana build, which by itself is just really powerful, even if you don't weave in the Bloodblade gimmick as much as I am doing just to prove the point. Having it there as the option is just fantastic in any big opening that you may get, while just being generally massively strong. And of course, you can weave in any incantations you want to this, as you do have a little bit of spattering of faith, and well, you can take this in a lot of directions. But the simple fact here is the ability for now Bloodblade to apply bleed 3 different ways with every swing turns it into an absolute monster of a damage dealing powerhouse, and it is very much worth you paying attention to. For now then, ladies and gentlemen, like if you have enjoyed this, subscribe and hit the bell for more. Consider supporting the future of this channel on Patreon down below. And until we meet again, a goodbye.
Josh, Cotton, and Hollow with the videos, dropping the humor like a hammer on your tippy toes, bringing entertainment on a daily arrangement to take our insanity and turn it into entertainment. Yes, I said entertainment twice, to reiterate that it is nice to look into your faces on a mostly daily basis when you let us in your homes to make the whole world a stage. Goodbye.